Everybody, welcome to this session of our regular Tuesday classes. We'll start with the prayers, and I think Meera has got some announcements which we'll take at the end of the class. Okay. I'll just put on the slides so we know where we are. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Lovi Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabbe Simpadamam Havai Mangalam, Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Lovi Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabbe Simpadamam Havai Mangalam, Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Sabba Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukaro Sabba Pavapanasano, Mangalanancha Sabbe Simpadamam Havai Mangalam. Veera Sarvasura Surendra Mahito Viramuda Sansrita Virena Bhiyata Swakarma Nichayo Viraya Nityam Namah. वीरातीर्थमिदं प्रभुतमतुलं वीरशघोरं तपो वीरे श्रीधृति कीर्तिकान्तिनिचय श्रीवीरभद्रं दिश अंगूठे अमृतवसे लप्तितणा भंडार श्री गुरु गौतम समरिये मनवांछित फलदातार. Reminder again, we listen, reflect, debate, question, then internalize and try and incorporate what we learn into our lives. Our ongoing topic is Baresar Sajjai, and I will recite that again. But as I reminded everybody last week, what we are going to do today is strike a slight deviation from the learning about the holy people who we remember in this Sajjai, and take the story of one other person as a contrast to try and learn a bit more about what we understand from the story of Salibhadra that we were learning about for the last two lessons. And there's still a couple of things that I want to tell you today about Salibhadra that to end that story. And then we'll compare that story with the one that we are going to recite today. So the Sajjai is Parhesar Bahubali Abhay Kumaro Dandan Kumaro Sirio Aniauto Aimuto Nagadatto Mej Thulibaddo Vairisi Nandi Sena Sihagiri Kaivanno Sukosala Pundario Kesi Karakandu Halla Vihala Sudansana Sala Maha Sala Sali Baddo Paddo Dasana Baddo Pasana Chando Ajasabaddo जम्बू पहु वंक चूलो गए सुकुमालो अवंति सुकुमालो दन्नो इलाई पुत्तो चिलाई पुत्तो अबाहु मुनि अज्ज गिरी अज्ज रखिया अज्ज सुहति उदाय गो मणगो काले सुरी संभो अज्जुनो मूल देवो बावो विष्णु वेणु कुमारो अद्द कुमारो दड्ड पहारिय सिजन से कुरुगड्डू सिरंभव मेह कुमारो हे माई महासत्ता दिंतु सुहम गुण गणे हिम संजुता जेसिम नाम गणे पाव बंदा विजय विलयम जंती सुलसा चंदन बाला मनोरमा मेण रेहा दमयंती नमिया सुंदरी सिया नंदा बद्दा सुबद्दाय राय में ऋषिदत्ता पौ मावय अंजना ऋषि श्री देवी चिट्ठ सुचिट्ठ मिगावई पपावई चलना देवी बम्बी सुंदरी रूपिणी रेवई कुंती शिवा जयंतिया देवै दोई धारिणी कलावै पुफुचुलाय पोमावय गौरी गांधारी लक्ष्मणा सुसीमाय चंबुवै सच भामा रूपिणी कणहठ महिषियो चखाय जखदीना बहुत भूतः चेव भूदिन्नाय सेना वेणा रेणा भैणियो थुली बद्धस्स इच्छाई महासयो जयंती अकलंक शील कलियाओ अजबी करे अजबी वजई जासिम अजबी वजई जासिम जस पढ़ो तिहोणे से ले. So again, I think most of you have been looking at this slide for the last several weeks, but in this sutra we are remembering 100 individuals who contemplated on the soul and made great spiritual progress. We are appreciating their actions and hope and pray that we can walk the path they followed. This is our Swadhyay. This Sajja is recited in the Raya Pratikraman in the morning, and it lists the names of 50 great men and 47 great women. We so far learned about the stories of 14 of these characters. As I've said, we are now not going by a sequence, but we are selecting some specific topics. So we will not hear about all the characters remembered in this Sajjai, but we will carry on for a few more weeks and learn about a few more characters. We talked about this particular story that this picture is depicting last week about the nature of our life and what we are facing on a daily basis, and how the story is labeled Madhu Bindu. Madhu is honey, Bindu is a drop. We spend our human life yearning for this drop of honey, while there are huge dangers for our soul all around us. So this is just to remind all of us that this is the nature of our situation in life, unless we grab the hand of this Dev who has come to help us. We talked about karma, and we are learning small bits about karma. We'll learn a bit more about that today. And we talked about the life, the story of Salibhadra. This particular picture depicts the story associated with the soul of Salibhadra in his previous life, when he acquires the punya that gave him such great wealth in his next life as Salibhadra. Now, what we didn't finish with is what happens to Salibhadra afterwards. As we know, he becomes a monk. He, under the auspices of Bhagwan Mahavir, and with his former brother-in-law, the Muni Dhanna or Dhanya Kumar, they both conduct their or follow the path of a Jain ascetic so well that Dhanya Kumar or Dhanna is specially praised by Bhagwan Mahavir during one of his sermons, that he was one of the best munis in his Sangh at the time. And we also heard about the story of Bhagwan Mahavir telling them on one day that when they are going out to seek alms or food to break their fast, and he reminds them that today you will receive food from your mother. And Salibhadra goes into the city of Rajguri, where they are at that moment stationed outside the city, and passes his old house where his mother still lives, but his mother is busy, she doesn't come out, and they carry on because they wouldn't be waiting, because Bhagwan has said that you will get food from your mother. Their expectation was that that is the house that they would get the food from. However, as they are going, returning back to their base, an old woman comes along and serves them some food. And when Salibhadra and Dhanna return back with the question in their mind that we were not actually served by my mother, Salibhadra says, and Bhagwan clarifies that the person who served you was your mother from your previous birth, and he then explains to him what his previous birth was and how he, as a young child of a poor widow, yearned for kheer one festival when all the other children were all getting kheer, and his mother borrowed different ingredients from kind neighbors, rice and milk and sugar and all those things, and made a lot of kheer for Salibhadra. But as he is waiting eagerly for the kheer to cool, a monk comes along seeking some food, and Salibhadra very generously, and with a great joy in his heart, pours the whole content of all the kheer that was made for him and left out there to cool into the patra. Patra is this thing where this boy is pouring the kheer that belongs to the Muni Bhagwant, and Muni Bhagwant lets him carry on. And Salibhadra, this young boy, the soul of Salibhadra, is so happy that he has been able to serve Muni Bhagwant and appreciates the value of his life. Though he may not understand any great detail, he can see the peace and the love and the uh, detachment in this Muni Bhagwant, and he's appreciating that. Even though he may not understand much, his soul, his mind, his heart is telling him that he's in the company of a great person, and he is joyful because he's met somebody like that, and is very happy to serve him the food that was made for him. Now, all that may appear to be a very minor matter, but that had the potential for completely changing the future for this soul, who in his next life is born as Salibhadra. And as Salibhadra, sorry if I've said Stulibhadra, some stages we are talking about Salibhadra, not Stulibhadra, but in his next life as Salibhadra, this young boy's soul has already paved a way towards his journey to moksha in a very short time. And we see what happens once they become monks. So Salibhadra and his brother-in-law Dhanna. And then the story goes that after the many years that he remained a monk and conducted his life as a monk in a most exemplary way, his life ends and his soul goes to Sarvarth Siddh Viman. And in his next life, after that particular life finishes as a Dev in Sarvarth Siddh Viman, that is one of the highest Devloks in the universe. And from there, after a long time, he will be born again in Mahavidya Kshetra and then go to moksha from there. So within one lifetime of a very generous act, Salibhadra's soul has paved a way towards total happiness, total peace, and a state where one would not be born again. In contrast, we are going to listen to the story of Maman Seth. Maman Seth was also a resident of Rajgruhi Nagari in the state of Magad at the same time when Bhagwan Mahavir was around. And this particular picture from an animated story recited very well for children in Gujarati. So if you want to listen to it, this whole story is available on YouTube, which shows a man in black clothes showing a person wearing a mugat with a lady there. So that's King Shrenik and his queen Chenana, one of his queens. And this man in black clothes is showing him two bullocks. So what is the story of Maman Seth? Let's just listen to the story. You'll find slightly different versions, but the commonest version that you will probably read about or hear is that once King Shrenik and his favorite Queen Chelana were sitting on the balcony of their palace late in the night, and looking at the view in front of them. So the palace was not far from a great river. It was not a very pleasant night. It was raining quite heavily. There's a lot of water in the river, and the river was full. And in the distance, in the river, Queen Chelna sees a man who is braving the currents of the river, going into the river and pulling out logs of wood or all different kinds of wood to bring them out onto the shore. He is worn very cheap looking clothes. He is working very hard pulling this wood from the river and piling it along the bank of the river. And she feels very sorry for him, and she tells King Shrenik that what sort of a kingdom are you running, that there are such poor people who are working so hard late in the night in heavy rain, just removing wood from the river, and it looks like this is how he makes his living. And it looks like he's extremely poor. How can we have people who are so much in such poor financial circumstances and are living such a hard life in our kingdom? Why don't you do something about it? So King Shrenik finds out who he is. One version is that he calls his men and asks them to bring him to him during the night. Another version says that he calls this man to the morning assembly of um, the parliament or whatever that you would like to call it. So the man comes along and the king asks him, why do you have to work so hard? Are you so poor that you cannot do anything? And what do you actually do with this wood? So the man says that I earn my living through that. I get all the firewood that I can find, bring it out, let it dry, and then sell it to people who need it. And that is how I earn my living. This is what about your family? So I've got children who are trading or earning money abroad, and they all send money here as well. So he says, why do you need so much money, or why you may be earning a bit? So this gentleman, whose name is Maman Seth, he says, I am earning money to finish the last horn of my two bulls that I've got at home. I'm trying to earn enough to make the last horn on this bull that I've got at home. And the king says, maybe I can help you so that you don't have to do such hard work and such risky work. And the man says, it difficult for me to explain to you what kind of barad or bulls that I've got. And King Shrenik says, okay, let me come and have a look at this barad or this bulls that you got at home. So the next day, the king and queen make a trip to Maman Seth's house, which is a large house, quite palatial but bare. And he takes them down the steps into the basement, into a room that as soon as he opens the room, the room is glittering with two large bulls, which are made of gold and precious stones. They are studded with precious stones. This pair of bulls, three horns, so two on one and one on the other, are made, and the fourth horn is incomplete. And the king, looking at the value of all the jewels that have been studied on these large bulls, and the value of the amount of precious metal that has been used, tells Queen Chelna that I do not have the wealth that I can help this person fulfill his wish to complete this kind of horn for this particular bulls that he's got, because each and every stone there is worth a fortune. So King Shrenik then tries to understand what else this man does, and he tells him, how do you live? He says, well, you've seen my clothes. We generally, I eat only one grain, food made out of just one grain. We use very little oil or ghee because that is more expensive. And I do not trade or invest money anywhere else because there is a risk that I might lose. I don't want to take the risk of investing money somewhere where I would lose. And so any kind of trading carries risks. So I found that this was the least risky kind of effort that I can make that is guaranteed to give me a regular income. And every amount of money that I make, I don't spend on myself, I don't spend on the house, I don't spend on clothes. I have very simple needs, and I save all the cash, all the money that I earn to buy these jewels to make this particular pair of bulls that I have been working on for so many years. So he's earning a living without taking any financial risk. He's working extremely hard, meaning he goes out late at night, throughout the day, wherever he can find wood floating in the tree, he jumps into the river, drags it out, lets it dry, and then goes out and sells that wood to people, makes the money, and he has found the cheapest way to live. But he's earning a lot of money. He's pouring all his earned income into buying these precious jewels to make these bulls. That is what King Shrenik and Queen Chelna see here. So the king says, I cannot do anything to help this man. He is not poor, but he is extremely poor. So here, let's sit back and reflect a bit. This man is not enjoying any of his wealth, but he is so attached to what he wants to make. He's a collector, and his life revolves around these possessions that he has been building up, and that's all he's interested in. What do you think is this attachment doing to him? And what is the nature of greed? We all have our favorite things. We all have things that we desire. We all worry and sometimes get very upset if we lose something that has either financial value or sentimental value, and we all get attached to some things or the other. Some of us may be very lucky and not get attached to anything, and we don't worry about possessions. Some of us may not be attached to things, but we are working very hard, and some very lucky people are not working very hard to earn a living or to earn a lot of wealth. Okay. Anybody wants to venture some comments or question? What kind of life is Mama leading? He's a Seth. He's not poor. He's probably one of the wealthiest people in the city. And the difference between Salibhadra, who lives in the same city, and Maman Seth is stark. So what is the most glaring difference between their lives? We heard about Salibhadra. Anybody? There's no wrong answer. We are all learning. So go on, Shilaben. Thank you.
Shalibhadra has no attachment to his wealth or his spiritually, he's really enlightened himself. Whereas Maman Shet, I think he has so much attachment to his possessions, especially he wants to finish that bull, the last one which is left over. And he's completely engrossed in that whole concept that he should finish it within a certain period. And he doesn't know, nobody knows when our end will come. But I think he's forgotten that one day he might have to go means leave the world as well. And he's in that frame of mind that he has to finish the one horn that is still left to be done. And
Okay.
he overworks himself.
Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place his greed and where would you place Salibhadra's greed? 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest degree of greed.
Maman Seth would be 10 and Shalibhadra would be, I think, 0, because he had no attachment, whereas Maman Seth is really attached to his possession.
So in terms of aspiring to be like somebody, who is likely to be, who should we aim to be like?
Shalibhadra.
how far are we from being like him, and how near are we from being similar to Mammon Seth?
We are more near Mammon Seth.
Okay. So what is the fundamental misconception that Mammon Seth is holding on to? And that is what he is living by. The fundamental misconception is that this wealth is mine, that I possess it, that is, as you said, Sheila Ben, is forgotten, that his life is going to end one day. He probably doesn't have any lasting thought that tells him that he is not going to be able to take any of it with him away. But this degree of greed and attachment does something that we will understand in a few minutes. Now, this slide is a bit about the previous lives. But the story goes that Mammon Seth, having lived his life completely, totally engrossed as a collector and accumulator of wealth, his soul departs and ends up in Narak, in a very low place in Narak. For a long, long time, he will be there, whereas Salibhadra throws away all his wealth because he does not have any attachment to it. He doesn't see any value in it. He sees the value of his own soul and being completely free of any desires as much, much greater than any material possessions. And he ends up in Sarvarth Siddh Viman, and in his next life he'll be born in Mahavidya Kshetra and go to moksha from there. Mammon Seth soul will travel around experiencing different lives, but constantly experiencing a lot of pain, discomfort, and all secondary to greed. But they were both wealthy. The laws of karma says that the laws of karma say that nature will give you what you desire. What is it that Mammon Seth desired in his previous life, and what did he do, as a result of which he got fantastic wealth, but he had to work extremely hard to earn that wealth. He didn't enjoy any of his wealth. And at the end of that life, his soul goes down to Narak because of the pap that he had accumulated in this greed that he sustained for a lifetime. What did Mammon Seth do in his previous life? Let's listen to that story, and we'll then come to this next slide. The story goes that Mammon Seth's soul was a simple merchant, a Shravak in his previous life. Once he had gone to a religious event, a satsang, something, and at the end of this satsang, as we have the custom here as well, and in most of the places where you go to a satsang or a simple sermon or a religious event, at the end of the event, some generous people would serve what is called a prabhavna or a bhathu. And generally, the prabhavna is an item of food. So during Paryushan, which are coming shortly, at the end of the Pratikama, it will be announced that somebody has donated some prabhavna today. So please wait before you go and collect your prabhavna. So Mamarset's soul in this particular life had gone to such a religious event and was somebody had been distributing prabhavna, giving to everybody who had attended the event. And Mamarset took his prabhavna and made his way towards his home, thinking that he will go home and then use this prabhavna. What was the prabhavna? The prabhavna was a piece of sweet called sukhdi. Sukhdi is a very nice sweet, and he has it in his hand. On the way to his home, he meets a monk and feels very generous, and he tells the monk, please accept this half a piece of my sukhdi. So he shares part of his sukhdi and gives it to the monk, and the monk kindly accepts it. From this place where he has donated part of his sukhdi to the monk, Mamarset's soul, Mamarset's in that life, whatever his name was, reaches his home, sits down, and because the sukhdi looks very attractive, very appetizing, he sits down and starts eating it. The moment he puts it in his mouth, he's so impressed that this is such a wonderful sukhdi that he's never tasted something like this, and he gets completely engrossed in the taste of this sukhdi and begins to regret his act of generosity in giving half of that sukhdi to a monk. That thought doesn't end there. And in his mind, he may not have been very thoughtful, but the way things worked at that time, he is so greedy for that sukhdi, and that taste of that sukhdi completely bewitches him. He decides to go back and find the monk to ask him to return his sukhdi to him. Now, in the first instance, this poor soul was very generous and gave half of the sukhdi to the monk. Why? Because he appreciated who the monk was. He understood the nature of an ascetic Jain monk's life, and he had the appreciation of their life and the value of that life. So he valued the monk's life more than the sukhdi and gave him part of it. But then he returns back to the monk, and the monk tells the monk, can you please give it back to me? So that is a version that I've read as somewhere as well years ago. And the monk, obviously, this is dravya that has been given to a monk. They cannot return it. And he sees that this person has now got his heart and mind and his desires are so attached to this sukhdi that it is not right for me to eat it either, and I cannot give it back to him either. So he breaks it and mixes it up with the mud on the road, and that's the end of that Sukhli. And Mammon Seth's, that person who is destined to be Mammon Seth in the next life, goes back home with regret in his mind and doesn't think much more about this incident. Both these incidents of this young boy generously giving the kheer to the monk and Mammon Seth's soul in this previous birth giving the sukhli to another monk are similar acts of generosity. The person that they are giving this are ascetic monks who are following the 5 great vows. So they are great people, and that appreciation of that greatness and the value attached to that kind of life earns them both a huge amount of punya. The young boy who is destined to be Salibhadra continues to be grateful, joyful, thankful that he has met a monk and shared his kheer. To him, the value of the monk far exceeded the value of the kheer, and to him, the appreciation of the virtues of the monk, whether overtly or even without thinking, his soul is happy that he has served a monk. That thought and that joy after a good act continues to build such great punya for him that at the end result of that in his next life he becomes Salibhadra with no attachment to his wealth. And Shilaben said we would put that on a scale of 0, on a scale of 1 to 10 at 0 or less. Whereas Mammon Seth was generous, but he lost his generosity. What happens, he values at that moment when he wants to take back the sukhli, he has lost all appreciation of the monk, of the kind of life, and he is putting a much higher price on that sukhli and his taste for it than the life of the monk. So, as a result of that, he acquires the punya, but that punya is converted to a papanubandhi punya. At the end of that punya, all he is left with is wealth, but with greed, which has no limits. And that amount of greed takes him down to the 7th hell, to Nark. Whereas Salibhadra's detachment takes him up to Sarvat Siddhiman and will take him to moksha in his next life. So that is the nature of greed. Krodh, Man, Maya, Lobh, these are one of the 18 papsthanaks. So let's just think a bit about this appreciation. Apologies for the spelling mistake. The appreciation of virtue, appreciation of finding and being joyful about the good things in other people and the good things in the life that they lead, and being celebratory and joyful about that. So you all heard the word anumodana. That is the value of that. Demonstrating the appreciation. So in the first instance, they both demonstrated that appreciation, but the soul of Salibhadra in his previous life maintained that. Whereas the soul of Mammon Seth in his previous life lost that appreciation and regretted that appreciation, regretting his act of having helped a monk. and he felt sorry for having done some good. So lesson to us all, when you're doing good, be happy for it always. Don't say, I shouldn't have done that. If you've done a good deed, appreciate it yourself and wish that you could do more. So the first question you just answered, what was the nature of the action in the previous lives that bound the punya karma that gave both fantastic wealth? So the nature of the action was giving food or serving monks. So that is a supatradan, meaning great people who are leading a blameless life and following the path of Sudh Charitra, and you value that life above anything else that is material. And that is Supatradan. And the result was so different because nature will reward what you value. Nature will give you what you value. So Salibhadra valued the life of the ascetic and valued the freedom and the path to follow to achieve moksha. Whereas Mammon said, they may not have much knowledge of religion. They may not either understand anything in great depth in their previous life. So definitely the young boy would have had no detailed understanding of this concept. But within one lifetime, he actually got to that stage. Whereas Mammon said, may have understood more because he was older, but in his greed, he lost that appreciation of the life of a monk. And he valued material food, greed, the sense of taste, way above what he had done to give the food to the monk. I think we'll end there. So I just wanted to bring out the contrast and for us to reflect on the fact that actions and thoughts that we engage in on a daily basis, they may be very brief and they may sound or feel inconsequential. But small acts, something that has gone on for a very short duration, can have massive consequences in future lives because we are constantly attaching karmas with all the thoughts, deeds, speech, but also the state of our soul as to exactly where we are, what our leshyas are like. Are we, our soul inside, in a good place? Are we free of anger, greed, deceit? Are we peaceful? Are we appreciative? Do we have friendship to all living beings? Do we have anger within us? Are our thoughts violent? All that state of our soul, state of our mind, is constantly dictating the kinds of karmas that our soul is attaching at every moment of our life. So the whole point about learning the laws of karma is to understand this and to contemplate and reduce the risk of us pulling ourselves down, because everything that happens to us is ultimately down to what we have done ourselves. Okay. Any questions before I end? We've got a couple of minutes. And then I'll let Mira make her announcements. Nick? You're on mute, Nick.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, I have quite a different understanding of this Sanipada's story,
Uh-huh.
we're saying that he didn't have attachment to his wealth.
Mhm.
But what I understand is that he had a lot of pride in his wealth.
Mhm.
So without having the attachment, how can he have the pride in his wealth? He had the shock that somebody is bigger than me.
Yeah.
So to
that's
me,
Mhm.
where his punya comes into place is when he had that shock, and he had then felt, I've been greedy or very mindful of being a very wealthy person.
Mhm.
In reality, I'm far from that.
Mhm.
And that's why he went, then that led him to search. And I think that's where his previous life came into play, because he valued Guru Maharaj,
Mhm.
and he then went to search for a Guru Maharaj for himself.
Mhm.
So that's, I don't know. So it's
No,
quite a different thing.
I think we are both emphasizing slightly different aspects of it. So in terms of the material wealth and the material wealth that comes into it, his wealth was obvious. And as you say, he had pride in it, but his greater gift was that he valued something more than that wealth. So one, the dependence on somebody higher than him, he did not want that. And that led him to search for a path. And he met a guru, and then he listened to Bhagwan Mahavir and then became a monk. So he followed that path. So I think we both agree on that. But your understanding that his pride in his wealth was a form of attachment, but on the other hand, he was able to discard it and become a person with no possessions at all. Whereas in contrast, Mammon Set lived for his wealth. So
Yes.
in terms of the kind of karmas and the loss of the awareness of the nature of the soul and its qualities was concerned for both of them, there was a marked difference. So yeah. Thanks, Nick. Sorry, is there anything else? You got your hand up.
It's an accident.
Sorry.
No, I'm happy with your explanation.
No.
I'm happy with the explanation. So there's no more questions. Sorry.
Okay. No, I think we all look at these things differently. So there are many different ways of looking at the same scenario, and whichever way our understanding goes, the final or the most important aspect of it is the understanding of the spiritual message in this and the nature of the soul and what its qualities are, and anything that takes us in that direction of understanding and appreciating that is a valid understanding of the story. So we've said this in two different aspects. If you listen to other Guru Maharaj, they may have a very different way of looking at both these stories as well. So there are many layers to these stories. Thank you. If I've said anything that's against the teachings of the great Tirthankar Bhagwans, I ask for forgiveness. Vitragnyagna viruddhya kai parambulyo kevaya vicharayo te saviyo manochan kaya kare tasmichami dukram. Mira, you want to mention your announcements?
Yes, thank you, Ajit. Just to let you all know that in a couple of weeks' time before Borishan, there will be some pre-Borishan classes that Ajit is preparing, explaining the meaning of Borishan and amongst other things. It's all going to be in English, so do look out for communication when it comes out. Also, after Borishan, there will be some beginner classes of for Jainism. So again, there will be some communications going out. And lastly, at the end of September, we'll be launching a Oshwal Jainism reading club, where we'll be learning Dharma through reading the texts and discussing topics in the text, and thus increasing our knowledge on Dharma. So please look out for the WhatsApp messages that are on the Jainism class, and also other communication methods like Facebook and Instagram. So please look out for that.
Sorry, Mira, just the pre-Paryushan classes that will be conducted in association with Jayesh Pai.
Okay.
And it will be in English and Gujarati. That was the original plan, and we're hoping that that's how they will be conducted, and the dates for those will be announced. I think this will be part of the Sunday satsang. That was the original plan, but let's see how it works out.
Okay, so this will all be in the communication once it's all been finalized, but just to be aware that this is on the horizon.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your interest. Sarvamangalam Sarvakalyana Karanam Pradhanam Sarvadharmanam Jainam Jayati Sasanam. Okay, Mira.